Okay, welcome everybody. It has just turned 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We will go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few more people that are still going to be joining us, but we'll go ahead and get started. The session is being recorded, so for anyone that does join us a little bit late, there will be a way to go back and rewatch. I will go ahead and let's get us moving here. So thank you for joining us for this joint hosted webinar with Action Industries and Miller Edge. My name is David Makepeace. I am the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for Miller Edge. I'm going to be taking you through a really, hopefully very useful tutorial today that's called Demystifying Sensing Edges for Commercial Door Systems. I know that for a lot of folks out there, you're involved with quoting, selling, and offering sensing edges in a wide variety of door applications. And we want to try and make that as easy as possible for you. Sensing edges, I think, are definitely an area where people have some kind of gaps of knowledge sometimes. So going through this kind of info will aim by the end of the session to have you, if you're not already, really comfortable with the various options that you can choose and what those options are, and how to go ahead and quote and order sensing edges through your Action Industries or North Shore Commercial Door rep. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a quick look at an agenda here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover the industry standards and codes that pertain to sensing edges. That's really ANSI UL 325. We'll talk through what that is. We're not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but we'll go over just some basics to kind of build a foundation. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about, more specifically, entrapment protection and how that kind of flows out of UL 325, what the requirement is. We'll go over some terminology. I think one area that often is probably gets confused, or people need some more assistance on, is monitoring versus non-monitored solutions, and where those apply and why they're used, and what the basics are behind that. So we'll spend a little bit of time there, and then we're hopefully going to spend most of the session on a worksheet that we have that you'll be able to get through your rep, and they will be able to provide this to you after the session, so you'll be able to actually use this and complete this when you're out there working with customers and you need a sensing edge. You'll be able to use this form to make that as easy as possible, and we'll kind of spend most of the time going through that and showing you kind of how that works. A couple of pieces of housekeeping just before I move ahead. We do have a chat box, so feel free, if you've got any questions, fire them over into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them as I see them, or at the end of the session. And yeah, like I said, any questions are welcome. If they're focused on sensing edges, we'll try and get them in this session here. If they're focused on something else, then I'd be happy to touch on those after we're done here with the session. So let's get down to the basics of it. ANSI UL 325. So this is the nationally recognized standard for door systems, amongst other systems as well. So you can see gates are included in there, window operator systems. We're not going to touch on any of those. We're just kind of focused on the door operator element. So from a door operator perspective, what is the base requirement for UL 325 as it pertains to entrapment protection to safety devices? There are effectively two ways to comply with the standard, and they both flowed out of the last major revision that impacted doors, or that impacted entrapment protection for doors anyway, and that was back on August 29, 2010. So from that date onwards, the standard was worded in such a way that you could do one of two things to meet that standard. You could either have what we call constant pressure on the close button, or you can do what we call the connection of a monitored device for momentary contact. And to break those out even more simply, when we say constant pressure on the close button, effectively the person operating the door becomes part of that safety system. They're responsible for holding their finger on that close button and making sure that nothing and nobody is underneath the door as the door is closing. The other way to comply with the standard is by connecting a monitored device for momentary contact. So momentary contact being the opposite of constant pressure. Momentary contact, I can press the down button, press the close button and walk away, or I can use a wireless remote or something that isn't, I'm not directly standing at the door. And again, to do that, we have to connect a monitored device. What is a monitored device? We're going to go into the monitoring piece in a little bit more detail, but the device is either a sensing edge or a photo eye. We're going to focus on sensing edges today, but the two ways to meet that device piece is with either a sensing edge or a photo eye. So a quick recap then. You've got two options to comply with UL 325 when it comes to entrapment protection. You've got either constant pressure or you've got the minimum of one monitored entrapment protection device. Now, you're going to hear me kind of repeat this throughout a couple of times here, but ancillary devices, extra devices, are certainly always encouraged. Just because we're talking about, if you're adding a monitored device, doesn't mean that has to be the only device on the door. We would certainly encourage more than one device in a number of applications. And that's really going to come down to the type of application that it is. Now, in most door applications, to differentiate it from gate, for example, with doors, there's really normally one kind of plane of motion that we're concerned about, which is the closing motion. So we're really looking at the underside of the door, the leading edge, as it closes. Now, there are a few other kind of weird and wonderful examples, but for most of the industry, when we're talking about commercial doors, the majority is going to be sectional and rolling. We'll probably take up the biggest portion of that commercial market. So we're looking at protecting the leading edge. But just because we're looking at that leading edge doesn't necessarily mean that one device is going to be the right solution for that customer. They may need more than one device, and that could be a combination of a sensing edge and a photo eye, single beam photo eye or a light curtain. But we definitely want to make sure that just because it says one device that's meeting the standard, you may want to add more based on what's required. Okay, so let's talk about the terminology a little bit. Let's talk about non-monitored and monitored devices. So when I say non-monitored, what exactly do I mean? Well, really what I mean is that when I talk about a non-monitored device, there's no way for the operator, the door operator, to check whether that device is either connected or whether it's operational. So these non-monitored devices were very typical pre-UL 325 2010, before the standard change, because there was at that point really no widespread requirement or even built-in system of monitoring for most operator systems. They are also still used as ancillary protections. You'll notice in the standard, the requirement was for one monitored device. So the extra devices, if you add them, don't necessarily need to be monitored. So the non-monitored type devices can be popular for extra protection, even on newer style operators. Let's look at briefly here how the non-monitored systems actually operate. So I've got an image of a door here, and we've got the sensing edge in yellow on the bottom of the door. So let's imagine that this is a non-monitored device, and that the sensing edge either fails, becomes disconnected. Well, because the operator has no way to check and know whether the device is operational and working, usually in most cases, the door will just continue to operate as it would do. So if it's set up with momentary contact on the push button, so you can hit close and walk away or use a remote, it will continue to operate even with that device no longer working. So you can kind of see how and why that UL 325 change was a benefit, because in these examples here, with older operating systems especially, where the device is no longer working, the end user, we may not know that that device is not working. So you really have to rely on testing on a regular basis to make sure that the device is working. So if you have an older operating system with sensing edges, with other devices as well, those need to be checked on a regular basis to make sure that they are functioning and working. So one good reason as to why you may want to look at upgrading an operating system, especially if it's older than that August 29, 2010 date, amongst a host of other reasons, but that's just one to look at. So when I say monitored, what do I mean? Well, we really mean the opposite of non-monitored. So when we're talking about monitoring, we mean the ability for the door operator to check and make sure that the device is both connected and functioning properly. So the monitoring, as it says here, it facilitates the momentary contact method of meeting the UL 325 standard. So if you want to have, if it's a brand new operator and you want to have, or even if it's, if it's post 2010 effectively, and you want to be able to close the door with a single push on the close button or with a remote, you must have a monitored type device connected and operational. One thing to kind of note here, again, we're talking about sensing edges, but that could be either a photo eye or a sensing edge, and both photo eyes and sensing edges are available in monitored and non-monitored configurations. So whether it's an older operator or a newer operator, you can still meet those requirements. But yeah, the big difference here is that when we talk about monitoring, we mean that the device is able to be read and checked by the operator that it's connected and functioning. So how does the monitored system operate? Well, it's a little bit different than the non-monitored, and this is in a good way, in that if the system is working okay, and we can see the yellow sensing edge on the bottom of the door here, if the system's working, if the edge is connected, if the operator can read it, the door will run as it normally would do. So if you've got it set up for momentary contact, you'll be able to press the close button and the door will close. If that device becomes disconnected or is no longer functioning, normally, in most cases, the door will be set up, or the operator will be set up to revert back to constant pressure. So if the door is operating with momentary contact, and all of a sudden, the end user notices that their door is no longer using momentary contact, but it's requiring them to hold their finger on the close button, it's a fairly good bet that the device that's connected, the entrapment device, may need to be looked at, maybe non-functioning or become disconnected. So it's really it does two things. So it forces the end user to make sure that they reach out, and make sure that they can fix the door and have it serviced. But it will also stop that door from acting in a more dangerous way. And that if that device is no longer working and connected, we really don't want the door to close automatically. We want that person to kind of be there monitoring the door. So you'll kind of notice that by reverting back to constant pressure, it's meeting the UL 325 standard. So it's either momentary contact with a monitored device, or if that fails, it's going to revert back to the other method, which was constant pressure. Let's take a look here at how the monitoring and non-monitoring is different when we're talking about sensing edges. So if I pulled open a sensing edge and we looked at the inside, this is pretty much what you would see. So there's two flat contacts that sit just apart inside of the sensing edge. When you squish the edge, when it's compressed, those two contacts meet, which is what activates the sensing edge. When the sensing edge is non-monitored, you'll notice that there's just kind of two wires coming out of those contacts. That's why we say there's no real way to monitor whether that's connected or functioning. It's truly just a normally open switch. To differentiate, there is the two-wire monitored version where we have that same setup. Now we're terminating the end of the sensing edge with something. It can differ a little bit. Most cases, it's a 10K resistor. There's one example where it could be a diode capacitor, but we terminate the far end of the sensing edge, and by doing that, the operator system is able to read and make sure that, for example, with a 10K resistor that there is that correct level of resistance. So it's functioning and operating. The other image that we have here, which I just put here because you may run across it is there are what we call 4-wire sensing edges out there as well. Now they're probably less common, certainly less common than the 2-wire, but if you do run across them, know that they do exist. I generally advise just sticking to the 2-wire monitored and non-monitored. I mean, you can certainly replace the 4 wires like for like if you see them out there in the field. And they're set up somewhat to work in a similar way in that you still have the 2 contacts, but I have a wire going into the top contact and a wire going out, and a wire going into the bottom contact and a wire going out. And effectively that allows me to somewhat monitor, again, the condition of the sensing edge in a slightly different way. There's one kind of operator brand that still uses sometimes these 4-wire edges, but most operator brands out there, or in fact, all of them that I'm aware of on the North American side are at least compatible with the 2-wire, non-monitored and unmonitored, and these are the ones that you're going to see most out there in the field. So a little recap on what to do. So if the operator is manufactured before August 29, 2010, what are we going to do? Well, the additional entrapment protection may or may not be required, but it's certainly recommended for safety. But all these devices, they're going to be non-monitored. So you're going to use a non-monitored photo eye, you're going to use a non-monitored sensing edge, or a combination of the two. In order to get that momentary contact, certainly you'll want to use at least one or more of these devices to provide the safest environment possible. If the operator is manufactured on or after that date in 2010, then you need at least one monitored external entrapment protection device or constant pressure on the door closing. So if you want momentary contact, you're going to need either a monitored photo eye, a monitored sensing edge, or a combo of the two. So you can have a monitored photo eye and a non-monitored edge, a monitored sensing edge and a non-monitored photo eye, so on and so forth. So you can kind of mix and match depending on what the best setup is for that environment. All right. Doing pretty good here. I don't see any questions in the chat. So now what we're going to do is, like I mentioned before, we have a really great field worksheet that I want to take you guys through now that we've explained some of the terminology. And we're going to look at here, step by step, the options that are available commonly for sensing edges and how they apply and how to kind of use them. So this sheet that you're looking at will be available through Action Industries or the North Shore site as well. So make sure that you reach out to your usual representative, and they will get you this sheet so you can have this for your own use. But it's super handy. I would recommend definitely getting a copy of it. This will be a great guide. So what exactly is this? Well, it's a step-by-step guide to either quoting, ordering, or just even understanding the various portions to a sensing edge. So we're going to go through this kind of step-by-step and go through an example. So the first thing that this starts out asking is, what sensing edge model do you want? You'll notice that Miller Edge has a variety of sensing edge models. So how do you pick which model is right for you? Well, we try to simplify this as much as possible. We have a sectional side and a rolling side. So first thing you're going to do is just select based on the door type is which side you're on. So is it sectional or rolling? So let's say we're going to be on the sectional side. We'll do that one first. So it's going to ask you next, what's the door thickness? So that's going to determine, again, the profile size. So some profiles are a little bit slimmer than others. So we want one that's kind of commensurate with the thickness of the door. So if we have a 2-inch thick door, which is fairly common, then we're going to go down here and it says 1 3/4 to 2 inch. We're going to pick the ME123. So I'm going to go over here and select ME123. That's the first portion done. So nice and easy. On the rolling side, slightly different in that we've got a few different options. So probably what's really common would be a double angle bottom bar. So if it's a double angle that kind of splits apart, we have a model that fits that. If it's like a single solid bar, then we have another couple of models that we recommend there, one of them being the ME123, and then so on and so forth. There's a couple of other more kind of custom options here that are common, so we listed them here as well. But yeah, you can see it's fairly straightforward. Now, is this going to cover every single application? Possibly not. There may be an odd one here or there that doesn't maybe fit into these categories, but this should cover, I would imagine, 95% of those applications that you're going to run across. So we've selected the model for our sectional door. Then we're going to run down and go into the next step. So the next step is color. Not every single sensing edge has color options, but many of them do. So you'll see here listed. So if it's one of these models on the left-hand side for sectional, we have black and yellow. Or sorry, if it's ME110, 112, 113, or 123, you're going to select your color here. So yellow is only available for the ME123. Should be more clear there. So the other models here, it'll be black only, but the yellow is available for ME123 only. On the rolling side, we've got some more color options. So you can see if you select an MT21 or an MT22, which is common for the double angled bottom bar style rolling steel doors, you've got 5 color options, really 4. The XR5 is a specialty chemically resistant type material that we commonly use for hanger door type applications. So you really got the 4 here. So gray, black, yellow, or yellow, black stripe. So you'll go ahead and just obviously select the color that you want. So since we're doing the ME123, I can choose black or I can choose yellow. So we'll go ahead and we'll choose black. That's probably the most common selection for sectional sensing edges anyway. So once we've got our color, then we're going to choose our outlet location. So by outlet location, we mean where does the wire exit from the sensing edge? So we've got options here. Depending on the model, some or all of them may not be available, but certainly all the common ones that you're going to run across, you'll have the ability to bring it out from the left-hand side, which is what the L stands for, the right-hand side, which is what the R stands for, and then there may be an end, so it comes directly out of the end, or a universal. And the universal works in 2 slightly different ways for sectional and rolling, but I'll explain them here. So on the sectional side, when we say universal, what we mean is the wire actually comes out of the end. There's a horizontal groove that runs through the sensing edge where you can kind of see that plane is, that line, that red line. And that horizontal groove allows you to snap the wire either way. So you can take it either to the left or to the right. On the rolling side, similar kind of concept in that we've got our left-hand side, our right-hand side. The universal, again, the wire is going to come out of the very end, and there are already holes that are pre kind of cut into the material that will let you either bring the wire out to one side or the other. Now, you may be kind of asking me, Dave, can I just flip the sensing edge around? If it's a left-hand side, but I need it on the other side, I can just flip the edge around and it will be on the other side. Just keep in mind, if you do that, you're now on the outside. Let's set this up. Let's say you're inside the building looking out, and the operator is on the right-hand side. So inside looking out, operator's on the right-hand side. You're going to want to order the edge with a right-hand wire outlet. So that way, or universal, either universal or right-hand. So if it's on the right-hand side, that sensing edge wire will come out of the right-hand side and then can be mounted with a junction box and then fed up to the operator. If you order it with a left, well, yes, of course, you can kind of flip the edge around and do like a complete 180. But if you do that, the wire is now going to be on the outside of the door, not on the inside. So you want to make sure you get that right. So I would recommend, if there's a universal option for the sensing edge, which for the ME123 there is, and certainly for the common, the MT22, for example, there is. So I would recommend selecting that universal option unless it's not available. I would get into the habit of writing down. So if you're inside looking out, if the operator's on the inside, then you're going to be get into the habit of writing down, is it left or right, and that way you at least have the information. But in terms of ordering or quoting a sensing edge, I would always just suggest going with universal, because the universal can go either way. So there's one less thing that can kind of go wrong there. So we'll select, let's say we know it's a right-hand, operator, but we're going to go ahead and select universal since that makes it easy. Okay, next thing is going to be the active length. So for length, really straightforward for sectional. So for sectional, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit as well, make it easier to see. So for sectional, all we're going to do is just measure the width of the panel to determine the length. So if it's a 10-2 section, the sensing edge is going to be 10-2. It's as straightforward as that. Nothing else really required. On the rolling side, slightly different. So on the rolling side, we don't want the active portion of the sensing edge which when I say active portion, I mean kind of the hard-bodied piece, not the whole flat, but the hard-bodied piece of the sensing edge. We don't want that rubbing on the guides. So what we recommend for rolling steel is you're going to measure the tip of guide to tip of guide. You're going to deduct 2 inches, and that's going to be what we call the active length. It's going to be the hard block from one side and the hard block on the other. There will then be flaps, these flaps that you kind of see on the end here. They'll stick out, and you'll be able to tuck those into the guide. So they'll make up that small little gap that we'll have between the guides and the hard body of the sensing edge. They'll tuck into the guides and give you a nice, good seal. So again, you don't want to just take the guide-to-guide measurement and order the sensing edge at that length. You want to take 2 inches off of that tip of guide to tip of guide measurement. That's the measurement you're going to write down. Well, let's say my tip of guide to tip of guide was, let's say it was 11'0". So in that case, I would take 2 inches off of that and make that 10'10", for example, right? So I'm going to take that 2 inches off to make it correct. Let's say we're sticking with our sectional door example here, and let's say again my section is a 10'2", so I'm just going to put in here 10'2", and you can put in, it's 1/4 inch increments. So if I wanted to, I could do 10.225, for example, if it's 1/4 inch, but we'll just leave it at 10 to make it simple. All right, so now we're into the monitoring piece. You'll kind of see why I talked about this already, because it's in this section here. So we tried to make this as clean as possible for you. So it's got a little bit of a guide here. So if monitored photo optics are not installed, so if there are no photo eyes and the door operator was manufactured after that August 2010 date, then the edge is going to be monitored. So I'll repeat that again. So if there are no monitored photo eyes installed and the door operator was manufactured after that 2010 date, and you want momentary contact on the closed button, which we're assuming here, you're going to want to select monitored. You're going to select non-monitored if either of these two things are true. It doesn't have to be both, but it can be either. So if either there are monitored photo eyes installed, one, or if there are no photo eyes installed, but the door operator was older than that August 2010 date, then you're going to select non-monitored. So essentially, if the operator is older than August 2010, that's as far as you're going to go. You're going to select non-monitored. If the operator is newer than that date, but if there are monitored photo eyes installed, then you're still going to select non-monitored, because the monitored photo eyes are going to be that primary device. Sensing edge can be a secondary non-monitored. So let's pretend we're going to go ahead and select monitored, because you'll see why there's some more selections I need to make here. So if I selected non-monitored in the section above, then you'll see here, if you selected a non-monitored sensing edge, we're going to select 2-wire non-monitored in this area here, and we can move on. Nothing kind of further required. And if I select 2-wire non-monitored, that's all I need to do. I'm actually finished with this sheet. The next section down wouldn't even apply. So if it's a non-monitored edge, you're going to stop at section 6 here. That's the last thing that you need to complete. Now, we selected monitored. So either there are no photo eyes installed and this is a newer operator. There's no photo eyes installed and there's a new operator. So we therefore have selected monitored. So if I've selected monitored, I've then got two options here. We kind of touched on this already, but so you've got 2-wire monitored, which is going to be for most monitored applications. There is also an option, we talked about the 4-wire, for 4-wire monitored configurations. Now, I mentioned there was one operator brand, it's LiftMaster. They do have a way to interface with a 4-wire edge and make it monitored. You use their CPS EI module. I would generally, just to eliminate confusion, I would just stick with the 2-wire monitored. LiftMaster are compatible with that option too. So like I said, unless you really have to do that, I would just leave 4-wire alone. It'll just make life easier. So if it's non-monitored, you're going to select 2-wire non-monitored. If it's monitored, we're going to go ahead and we're going to select 2-wire monitored. You'll notice there's a couple of other options in here as well. So these are all electric. So monitored, monitored, non-monitored. We're talking about electric sensing edges. I'm not going to touch on these today, but we do offer air-activated sensing edges as well. So you can, if you want to, there will be non-monitored. There isn't a monitored option, but we have what's two different brands. One's called Airwave, one's called Pneumatic. The Pneumatic is a slightly newer technology, works on slightly bigger applications, some other features as well, but you can select those options there. And if you're interested, feel free to ask a question or reach out, and we can touch on those too. Alrighty. Okay. So final piece then. So we've done really good. Let's just recap for a second and see where we are, since I've been talking for a while here. So we chose the model. We chose ME123. We chose black. We chose universal handing. We chose 10'2" for the length. We chose monitored because there are no photo eyes and this door operator is newer than that August 2010 date. And then we selected 2-wire monitored because we're not going to mess around with a 4-wire. We're just going to leave it at 2. So now we're on section 7. So what's section 7 for? Well, I mentioned back in one of the earlier slides on the PowerPoint that some operator brands use a slightly different method of monitoring. Now, there's really only one that you have to worry about in that regard. So you'll see here in this section, we have kind of 3 models. We have T1, T2, and T3. T1, we're going to go ahead and discount. They're typically European operators, and we're probably not really going to run across many of those in the applications that you're working with. So we're primarily concerned with T2 and T3. T2, we colorize everything, and we use a blue color to designate T2, and T3, we use a red. Blue for T2 indicates a 10K resistor. So if you're out there in the field and you see a sensing edge with a blue wrap around the wire, it's a T2. It should have a 10K resistor in it. That's kind of how we indicate them. For T3, which is red, it means that there's a diode capacitor in the sensing edge. That's what's doing the monitoring. So if you're out there in the field and you see a sensing edge with a piece of red tape wrapped around the lead wire exit, that's where that tape will be, then there should be a diode capacitor in that sensing edge. So it's an easy, quick visual way, to detect and know what you have. Now, what are the operator brands that are compatible with those models? So pretty much everybody, apart from Overhead Door or Genie, will use a 10K resistive style of monitoring. If it's an Overhead Door or Genie brand operator, it'll be a diode capacitor. So really, I guess the big question is it Overhead Door or is it somebody else? And that'll tell you whether you're going to select the 10K or the diode capacitive. So let's say it's going to be a LiftMaster or a Chamberlain operator. So LiftMaster Chamberlain is under T2 here. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand side. Then I'm going to select T2. Perfect. I'm done, right? Almost done. So if I've selected LiftMaster and Chamberlain, you'll notice there are some asterisks here. There's a single and there's a double asterisk next to Overhead Door. So some of the operator brands don't have one and some do. Why is that? Well, some of these operator brands will need a module, an interface that goes between the sensing edge and the operator if it's a monitored device. If it's not monitored, you don't need any of this stuff. Like I said, this section's only for monitored. But if the edge is monitored, if the operator brand that we're looking for here has an asterisk next to it, which Chamberlain does, then if we scroll down a little bit further, we'll see here, so the single asterisk says, requires the SM102 signature module for operator compatibility. The Overhead Door and Genie one has the double, that says requires the SM101. So it's a slightly different module for operator compatibility. So if that's the case, if I'm ordering a monitored edge, if it's going to be LiftMaster Chamberlain, I know it's going to need this module. So we have an option over here that you can check. So I can check and say I want that SM102. If it was a T3, if it was an Overhead Door brand operator, I can, again, do the same thing. I'll select T3, and I need a slightly different module for that one, the SM101. If there is, let's say, for example, this was an operator brand that doesn't have an asterisk. So let's say it was a Cookson or a Cornell US Gear style operator, doesn't have that asterisk next to it. I don't need the module. So I'm going to still order the 10K, the T2 resistive edge, but it does not need to, I don't need to include a module for that. So I can discount the module. One additional thing that we have listed here as well. So let's say I'm ordering that LiftMaster Chamberlain, and it's going to be an SM102 because I need to connect it. I'm going to hardwire it. We do also have a wireless option. So you don't have to connect the sensing edge with a coil cord or a reel. You can use a wireless device as well. So we have an option that you can select there. So instead of the module, so it's either or, you don't need both. So if I don't want to use the module because I want to go wireless, well, I can just select that as an option instead. And then again, same thing for overhead door. If this is a T3, and it's a Genie brand operator, and I was originally selecting it as a hardwired setup, if I want to go wireless, I don't need the module. I'm going to need the wireless receiver transmitter kit. So I've got that selectable in there. So let's go back because we said this was going to be 10K. So I'm going to choose 10K, and we're going to keep it as a hardwired sensing it. So we're going to need that SM102. So if I pull out, I've got a date here. Put in the date, so I know what this was. And let's say this is going to be, well, I guess company name. So let's say ABC Doors, and this is for the FedEx facility. And I'm going to write down here, just so I know, Chamberlain. And if we know the door model, we can always add that in here. Let's say we don't even know. Let's say we just know it's a 2-inch thick door. So there we go. I've got my sheet completed here. So I've got the model, I've got the color, I've got the outlet location, the length, the monitoring, and I've selected my final pieces here for the monitoring. So then I can go ahead and save that document, and I have a fully completed info sheet there. And to be honest with you, I would encourage, if you feel like you're an edge expert, it's still worth having this because it'll help you and make sure that you don't miss a piece of information when you're out there trying to get something quoted and done. I know that if you're out there in the field collecting info and all of a sudden, you get a phone call, you get distracted, you might miss a little critical piece of info. So filling out the sheet does really help, I find, in making sure that you capture all of the information. So that takes us to the end of this session. I'm going to open up the chat box here. Like I said before, we will make sure that this is available for anyone that wants this sheet. Just contact your user representative. They will be able to get you a copy of this that you'll have and will be able to keep for yourself. And once again, thank you for joining us. My name was David Makepeace. Again, I'm the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for Miller Edge. I'd be happy to. I'll stick around here for at least another couple of minutes or so in case anyone has any questions on this or on any other topics. And yeah, thanks again for joining.
Looks like we got a question, David.
Yeah, I just saw it. So yeah, thank you for the question, Justin. So the question here was, I'll read it out just so everyone can hear it. Is there any advantage to having 2 monitored entrapment devices? Now, this isn't something that I covered, and I kind of did that almost on purpose to try not to introduce further confusion, but there are some operator brands out there that have inputs available for 2 monitored devices. So really, I would say if you have an operator that has those options available where you can connect more than 1 monitored device, that's great. The benefit to doing that would be that if that device is no longer working or has failed, you're going to be kind of made aware of it, or you can certainly set up the door usually to make you aware that there's a problem. The inherent risk with any non-monitored device is that when it fails, or if it becomes disconnected, or if it doesn't even get installed properly, it relies on somebody testing it. So if you're not regularly, if there's no one regularly testing the door to make sure that these devices are working, and you have the option to do 2 monitored devices, then that's great, and that's something that obviously you can do. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a downside to doing it. It's more often than not, it's dictated by which operator brand. Like I said, there's a couple that I'm aware of that have that option, but I would say, most it's still you got to add an extra board or a module, for example, to get that function. Most of the time, that monitored input, which was kind of originally, a lot of the time it's worded a few different ways, but it can often be called, the photo eye input or something like that. The monitored input, it's designed for that one device, and then the operator will have normally open inputs for for additional. But yeah, great question. So if you have the chance to do it, you can. It just gives you the advantage that if that device fails, then or is no longer working, then you can set the door up to be made aware of that. Good question. So, Matt asked, is it true that Action is the best place to buy edges? Well, I would have to agree that it's a great comment. I'm sure that would be a good quote right there. David Makepeace from Miller Edge says, just because, so this just came to mind actually, and I've had this asked in a few other places. So the modules that I referred to down below here in the monitoring method section, because it's not a necessary touch on this, but they're usually a stock item. So I would recommend, if you're not already keeping these around and available, I would do so. With more and more sensing edges becoming monitored, obviously just over time, every new installation, new operator, if you can use an edge, it's now going to be monitored rather than non-monitored. So you're going to use these on a fairly regular basis, and it can be a little bit of a pain if you're stuck out there and you're replacing something or fixing something and you don't have a couple, on the truck, for example. So I'd recommend, if you don't already have that, then I would definitely recommend getting it. And also, if you're interested and you're kind of asking about testing, like how do you test these various types, like I was talking about, there's a piece of tape on the wire. Well, if you're using it like a fluke or some kind of tester yourself to work out, is the 10K resistor working? What's the problem? If you're going through the troubleshooting stages, note that Miller Edge also does have an edge tester available that you can certainly get through Action Industries or through North Shore. That we have a tester specifically designed to test sensing edges, because that's another common question about how do we, is there tape or is there no tape? That'll help you, give you a little bit of information, but it's nice to know for definite whether there's a problem with the edge or not, or if you have the right thing. So there is what's called the Miller Edge tester that you can get that'll walk you through that. There's a great YouTube video if you go on YouTube and search. There's a video for it. I believe it's also on the website too. So feel free to check that out if there is any interest. Yeah, another great question. So what's the lead time for most safety edges? So all of or I would say the large majority, there are some other options nowadays, but for the most part, all of what we've talked about today, these are built in-house in either one of two locations, in either just outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, or just outside of Phoenix in Arizona. So we have two kind of main locations that serve North America. Most of the time, I would say, for the common options that you're selecting here, you should see, certainly, I would say around a week or so, hopefully less than a week, but on average, you can expect that to get out to you within that kind of time frame. We try to ship, I would say 2 to 3 days is our goal, but like everybody else at the moment with supply chain and other kind of logistics issues, that's probably been pushed out a little bit, but I would say around a week is a good estimate. And because we have two locations, we can get to most parts of the country pretty quickly. So if we're shipping UPS ground, for example, from one of those two locations, it's going to arrive in 2 to 3 days once it leaves the factory. But yeah, everything here that you're seeing, that's why we have those custom options, because we don't kind of let anything sit on the shelf as a stock size configuration. There's too many variations, so we build to order. All right, thank you, Josh. Okay, I'll stick around. Any other questions, then let me know. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up.
Thank you very much for your time today, David.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say we'll wrap it up there. Doesn't look like there's any more questions. So yeah, appreciate it, and you can always let me know if there's any other questions come in after we're done here. Happy to help anyone that needs some further assistance.